When Katie decided to move back into Bill's house, it was supposed to be a miracle, a fragile reconciliation built on shared memories, on what remained of trust after years of betrayal, redemption, and loneliness. For Bill, it was an opportunity to mend the broken lines of his family, to believe that perhaps love could still forgive what power had corrupted. For Katie, it was a hesitant leap of faith, one that trembled between the desire for stability and the fear of losing herself again to the man who had once broken her heart. Yet neither of them realized that the return to familiarity would also reopen the most dangerous vulnerability of all, the human heart, both literal and emotional. The grand estate that once symbolized success and control now felt like a fortress built on trembling ground, where every echo of the past threatened to turn into a weapon. When the first whispers about Luna's planned escape began circulating, Bill's instincts kicked in like those of a seasoned general preparing for siege. He reinforced the estate's security, added more guards, and restricted access to everyone outside his inner circle. He told himself that this was merely precaution, a reflection of prudence, not paranoia. Yet in his heart, he knew that Luna's cunning went beyond physical boundaries. She didn't just want to flee. She wanted to destroy everything he loved, piece by piece. Luna had always understood the anatomy of fear, how to make her enemies bleed without laying a hand on them, how to turn their own emotions into their undoing. For her, revenge wasn't about escape. It was about demonstration, about proving that even from the edge of captivity, she could manipulate those who once held power over her. Katie, fragile but determined, felt the tension in the air long before anything happened. She could sense the shift in Bill's tone, the way he lingered near the phone, the way his eyes darted toward the gates each time a car passed. There was something primal about the way he moved through the house now, not as a husband or father, but as a man who expected an attack from within his own walls. She tried to assure him that they were safe, that no one would dare to come this far, but deep down she wasn't sure. Her heart, weakened, unpredictable, became both a physical and symbolic reminder of the fragility of everything around them. Even love, when placed under enough pressure, could stop beating. The day Luna came was eerily calm. It began like any other morning at the Spencer estate. The faint scent of coffee drifting through the halls, the sound of Electra laughing with Will in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across the marble floors. Bill was in his study reviewing security footage from the night before, a habit that had become ritual, when the system glitched for a fraction of a second. A static pulse flashed across the screen, then returned to normal. He dismissed it as interference, unaware that in that moment, Luna was already inside the perimeter. Dressed in a simple black coat, her face half concealed beneath a hood, she moved with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times. She wasn't here to escape anymore. She was here to choose her battlefield. Katie was upstairs, sorting through old photographs in the bedroom. There was one of her, Bill, and Will from years ago, a frozen moment of happiness that now felt like a painting of strangers. She traced her fingers along the edges, wondering if love always came with a time limit, if every moment of peace carried the seed of its own destruction. Then she heard the sound, soft, deliberate footsteps echoing from the corridor below. At first, she thought it was one of the guards, until the silence that followed became too heavy, too calculated. Something was wrong. The rhythm of her breathing changed, quickened, as though her body knew the truth before her mind could name it. The world began to narrow, her pulse rising in uneven bursts, each beat louder than the last. Bill's phone buzzed. One of his men reported that the motion sensors near the east gate had been triggered, but then went offline. He ordered a lockdown, his voice calm but his hands trembling slightly. For all his power, all his wealth, Bill knew that Luna was not a threat that could be handled by guards or guns. She thrived in the gray area, where control met chaos, where rational men made emotional mistakes. As he stepped into the hallway, a faint noise drew his attention toward the grand staircase. At the bottom stood Luna, her posture eerily composed, her expression unreadable. The moment their eyes met, the air seemed to crackle. It wasn't just fear, it was recognition. They both knew that this confrontation had been inevitable. Katie appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching the railing for support. The shock of seeing Luna there, the woman who had haunted their lives, sent a jolt through her chest. Bill's instinct screamed for him to move, to protect her, but Luna raised her hand in a calm, almost theatrical gesture. "One move," she said softly, "and you'll regret it." There was something in her voice, a strange mixture of sorrow and triumph, that froze him. He wanted to believe that she wouldn't dare hurt Katie, but Luna's vengeance had never been about logic. It had always been about control. And in that moment, she controlled everything. The house, the fear, the fragile heartbeat that echoed faintly from the landing above. Katie's hand went to her chest. The pain was sharp, sudden, as though invisible fingers were tightening around her heart. She gasped, stumbling against the railing. Bill's face drained of color. Every second that passed became an eternity. Luna smiled faintly, tilting her head. "It's interesting," she murmured, "how easily love turns into weakness." The guards hesitated, unsure of what to do. Bill wanted to rush to Katie's side, but Luna's next words stopped him cold. "If you take one more step, I'll make sure she never sees another sunrise." He froze, torn between instinct and reason, between love and survival. What Luna demanded next was unthinkable. She didn't want money. She didn't want freedom. She wanted Will. Her words cut through the chaos like a blade. "You give me your son, or you watch her die." The sentence hung in the air, heavy, impossible. Bill felt as though the walls were closing in. Every rational thought, every ounce of strategy, dissolved beneath the weight of that choice. His mind flashed through memories. Katie laughing in the garden, Will's first steps, the promise he made to protect them no matter what. Now, those promises turned into a cruel irony. For all his power, he was helpless. Katie tried to speak, to tell him not to give in, but the pain in her chest silenced her. Her body trembled, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Bill could see the fear in her eyes, the silent plea that said both "save me" and "don't let her win." Luna stood motionless, like a conductor orchestrating the collapse of an entire symphony. She knew the psychology of guilt, that even if Katie survived, Bill would never forgive himself for what happened next. It was between redemption and ruin. As the seconds passed, Bill's composure cracked. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his breath uneven. Every fiber of his being screamed to act, to do something, yet every option led to destruction. If he gave Luna what she wanted, he'd lose Will forever. If he refused, he might lose Katie in front of him. And the cruelest part was that Luna wasn't bluffing. She didn't need to be. The sheer terror she instilled was enough to make reality bend to her will. Katie's vision blurred. She could hear distant voices, Bill shouting, the guards moving, but it all felt far away, like echoes underwater. Her heartbeats came in violent bursts, each one fainter than the last. In her fading consciousness, she thought about how fragile everything truly was. Love, for all its beauty, could become a weapon when placed in the wrong hands. And perhaps that was Luna's greatest cruelty, not killing her, but making her the instrument of her husband's despair. Bill caught her as she collapsed, her weight trembling in his arms. He screamed for help, his voice breaking. Luna watched silently, her expression unreadable. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, only the hollow stillness of someone who had gone too far to turn back. The sirens of the medical team echoed in the distance, but time felt meaningless. Bill pressed his hand against Katie's chest, counting the fading beats. The irony was unbearable. The man who once controlled empires couldn't command a single heartbeat to stay. Luna lowered her gaze, then turned toward the door. She had already achieved what she came for, not victory, but devastation. She didn't need to take Will. She had taken something far more permanent, Bill's faith in himself. By the time the guards rushed in, she was gone, a shadow slipping into the morning light, leaving behind a house full of echoes. At the hospital, Katie hovered between life and death. The doctors moved quickly, their faces masks of focus and exhaustion, but Bill could barely hear them. His mind replayed every second of that confrontation, every moment he hesitated, every breath Katie took before she fell silent. He blamed himself for everything, for not stopping Luna earlier, for not recognizing the signs, for believing that he could rebuild something pure in a world that thrived on corruption and revenge. He sat beside her bed, holding her hand, whispering apologies that no one could hear. The days that followed blurred together. Reporters gathered outside the hospital, hungry for a story. The headlines spoke of a spurned woman's vengeance, of the Spencer family under siege. But for Bill, none of it mattered. The only reality that existed was the beeping of the heart monitor beside Katie's bed, the fragile rhythm that reminded him she was still alive, and that her survival might depend on whether he could forgive himself.
He didn't eat. He didn't sleep.
He just watched her, haunted by Luna's voice whispering through his mind, "Love turns into weakness." Meanwhile, Luna became a ghost in the city, unseen but omnipresent. Rumors spread that she had escaped overseas, that she was planning something bigger. But Bill knew better. Luna didn't need to be seen to cause damage. She had already infected their lives with fear, and fear was the most resilient kind of poison. It lived in the spaces between words, in the silence before sleep, in the way Will flinched when someone knocked too hard on the door. Even after she was gone, she was everywhere. When Katie finally woke, she was disoriented, her memory fractured. The doctors said the heart attack had caused temporary cognitive fog, but her first instinct was to reach for Bill's hand. He was there, exhausted, his eyes red from sleepless nights. She tried to smile, but the weight in the room was too heavy. Somewhere deep inside, she remembered Luna, the shadow at the staircase, the terror, the pain, but she didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. The wound was still too fresh, not just in her body, but in her soul. Bill swore that he would find Luna, that he would end this once and for all. But in the stillness of that hospital room, he began to realize that vengeance might only deepen the wound. The real battle wasn't with Luna anymore, it was with himself. How do you protect those you love when your own guilt becomes the enemy? How do you rebuild trust when the foundation of your life has already cracked? Over the following weeks, Katie's recovery became a test of endurance. Her body healed slowly, but her spirit wavered. The near-death experience changed her. It stripped away illusions. She no longer saw Bill as the invincible man she once married, but as someone who could be both savior and destroyer in the same breath. She loved him still, but her love was cautious now, edged with fear. Each time she looked at him, she saw both the man who saved her and the man who hesitated, who almost let her die to protect their son. That hesitation, born of impossible choices, would haunt both of them. Bill threw himself into work as if success could absolve him. He expanded his empire, fired those he deemed unreliable, doubled security around the house. But none of it filled the void. Power had lost its meaning. He had once believed that control could protect him from pain, but Luna had proved him wrong. Control was an illusion, and love, the one thing he couldn't command, had nearly destroyed him. There were nights when he wandered the empty halls of the mansion, replaying the sound of Katie's faint breathing as she collapsed, the echo of Luna's voice whispering that final threat. He would stop in front of the staircase where it all happened and imagine time reversing, imagine saying the right words, moving fast enough, saving her before it was too late. But time was merciless. All he could do was stand there, listening to the silence that followed tragedy. Katie, meanwhile, struggled with the emotional aftermath. Every heartbeat felt like both a miracle and a reminder. She lived with a sense of borrowed time, as if any moment could be her last. The doctors advised rest, but her mind refused to rest. She wanted to understand why Luna hated them so much, why their lives had become the stage for someone else's vengeance. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that perhaps Luna's cruelty was a reflection of something deeper, the collateral damage left by power unchecked, by the way men like Bill built empires without realizing the lives they crushed along the way. Luna's revenge, in its twisted way, was born from their past sins. The confrontation at the mansion became a legend whispered among the elite, a cautionary tale about wealth, love, and the fragility of control. But for Bill and Katie, it wasn't a story. It was a scar. Every family dinner, every quiet morning, carried the residue of that night. Will grew distant, sensing more than he understood. Electra tried to keep the peace, but even she couldn't erase the unease that lingered in the air. Their home, once a fortress, had become a mausoleum of unspoken fears. Months passed. The world moved on, but Bill couldn't. One evening, as he stood by Katie's bedside watching her sleep, he realized that his greatest fear wasn't losing her, it was losing himself. Luna's shadow still lived in him, feeding on guilt, on the knowledge that love had made him weak. He had built his life on strength, on winning, on never yielding, but in that moment at the stairs, he had hesitated, and that hesitation had shattered everything he thought he was. And yet, perhaps there was a strange grace in that. For the first time, Bill saw the truth. Love was not a fortress. It was vulnerability, and vulnerability was the only thing that could make him human again. In the end, Luna had not destroyed him. She had forced him to see himself without the armor. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it made him understand that survival wasn't just about fighting. Sometimes, it was about surrendering to what was real. Katie eventually recovered enough to leave the hospital, but she was never quite the same. The color in her cheeks returned, the steadiness in her step improved, yet a quiet melancholy followed her. She often sat by the window, staring at the horizon, as though expecting Luna's shadow to appear again. Bill joined her sometimes, their silence saying more than words could. They both knew that something had ended, not just the illusion of safety, but the version of themselves that once believed in fairy tale redemption. The confrontation had stripped them bare, and in that rawness, they found something resembling truth. Katie no longer tried to be perfect, she allowed herself to be fragile. Bill no longer pretended to be unbreakable, he allowed himself to feel guilt, sorrow, even fear. Perhaps that was the paradox of tragedy. It destroyed illusions only to reveal the possibility of something more real beneath. Their marriage, once defined by pride and control, now survived on honesty and endurance. Still, at night, when the house fell silent and the shadows grew long, Bill could sometimes hear it, the echo of Luna's voice, soft and mocking. Love turns into weakness. And each time, he whispered into the darkness, almost as if to answer her ghost. Maybe weakness is what makes us human.